Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah's Erevin, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. Dedicate this morning's learning memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz. Okay, now, the Mishnah is discussing the following case. A well, called a water hole, was typically a Rishus HaYachid. It had the dimensions of a private domain. It was 4 tfachim wide, 4 tfachim long, and 4 tfachim deep. That was a very common well, which means that makes the well a Rishus HaYachid. So to bring up water from the well and put it into the public domain is a problem. And they would have these wells in the middle of the public domains. So to bring up the water from the well into the street or into the public domain is a Torah prohibition. You can't do that. Now, this created a problem for the people that we refer to as Oile Regalim, people coming up for Yontif, people who are coming up for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. As they would be traveling, they needed to give their animals to drink, but they were stuck because the wells were a private domain and the area around them was a public domain. What would they do? So there is really a Torah solution to this. There's really a Torah solution to this, which the Rabbanim, which the sages only allowed for Oile Regalim. This is not something a regular person can do, which is why you're not going to find it very much. You're only going to find it regarding Oile Regalim, finding people coming up for Yontif, because at the end of the day, the sages only allowed those people to use this this Torah wall, and this wall goes like this. Meaning you gotta have to. So what the point was to create a situation where I now have a private domain, meaning the well is a private domain and the area around is a private domain, which means I want to surround it by walls. But it's very hard in the middle of Mishra Sarabim probably to go ahead and build start building all the walls we've been talking about. And actually, more than that, there are other reasons why. Maybe theoretically you could have done the walls we spoke about yesterday, but the ones we're going to talk about now clearly have an advantage to them. So the Mishnah reads like this: Oisin pase lebirois. We can make boards around the wells. Pasin means boards. We can make boards around the well for the wells. Arba diyumdin, 4 double posts. Nirin keshmoina, that look like 8 posts. Di Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, it's going to be hard to see this picture. It's not very big. However, if you notice, you've got a square area. You've squared off an area around the well. And on the corners, you've got these posts. But they're not straight posts. They're posts that are perpendicular to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a single post. It's like a post that looks like this. Yeah. Exactly like this. You got one board this way, one board that way. But they're connected, right? That's what it means. That's a diyumid, a double post. So when Rabbi Yehuda says it's 4 looking like 8, means you have to set up a situation where you have 4 of those double posts that are squaring off an area, and you basically have each post is going into a different direction, and then if I do them on all 4 sides, I will now have squared off and walled off an area. This is considered. This has to, from a Torah point, have to be considered walled off. Otherwise, you're going to be able to do it. So this can work minat Torah. Now, as we'll see a little bit further, what the dimensions of these boards are. But right now, what's the setup? The setup is the double boards on 4 sides. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Next, we have now. This is only, like I mentioned before, this is only something that that the rabbis allowed for the Oile Regalim, and interestingly, is brought down is that this is only allowed, let's call it lachatchila initially, for your animals. You somehow or another could crawl into that well and drink from the well, or you could maybe bend yourself over that most of you will be in the well so you can drink. Mm-hmm. You could, for you to be in the well is easier for your animal to be in the well. So therefore, this allowance of the 4 double boards is primarily for the animals. But if, let's say, it's a situation where you can't get the water out of the well either, you could also use it. But essentially, for the animals, you can use it. For yourself, if you can yourself get into the well and drink in the well, fine. Otherwise, you can use these boards also. Mm-hmm. So that should be this opinion. Rabbi Meir says, Shemaina, 8 boards, Nirin Kishleim Asar, that appear like 12. Okay. Arba the Yumdin, 4 double boards, Barba Pshutin, and 4 regular straight ones. So basically, I'll show you the picture, but you can imagine it now, right? On all 4 corners, you have your 4 double boards. That's your 8. And then between each board on each side, you're sticking in a regular board, a one-sided board. So your total number of boards are 12. And that's this picture over here.
Yeah.
That's this picture over here.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got it on the 4 corners, and you have it in the middle. Now, what's interesting to note is it seems like we have a machlekes here. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need any more boards than the double boards on the corners. And Rabbi Meir says, no, you need more. So actually, as we learn further in the Mishnah, it's going to come out like this. That in a situation where the openings between the boards, let's make sure I get this right. According to everyone, if the gap between the boards is less than 10 amas wide, then everybody agrees all you need are the double boards on the corners. Once you're at a point where the gap in between the boards is more than 13 and a third amas, we'll see how these numbers come about, right? 13 and a third amas, then everybody agrees, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you have to add those single boards in between. The machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is between 10 and 13 and a third. Then is it just enough to have the double boards on the corners, or do you also need the single boards in the middle? Now, Mishna continues. Gavahan asara tvachim. Each one of these boards have to be 10 tvachim high. That's the minimum height for any partition. The rachvan shisha, and the width of each board has to be 6 tvachim wide. 6 tvachim is an amma. Okay? There are 6 tvachim in an amma. So basically, you've got the boards are 10 tvachim high. They're like an amma, almost an amma and amma and 3/4 high, while you have them wide 1 amma. That's mizrach and shisha. The width is 6. Vavin kol shehu, and the width, the thickness of these boards, whatever you want. The flimsiest thing as you want. Just better get people to stand. But there's no shear to how thick they have to be. Now, ubeinayim. Now, what's going to be the space in between them? What space is allowed in between them? Between them, there is a gap, the size, just to translate the words. Shtei revakais means 2 teams, of 3 oxen. 2 teams of 3 oxen have to be able to get through this gap. Now, let me read to you how they explain this. A single team of 3 oxen, and we're going to see it means they're tied together, is 5 amas wide. Each ox having a width of 1 2/3 amas.
Are these abreast?
Yes. Okay. Each is a width of 1 2/3 amas. So if 3 of them, 3 times 1 2/3 is going to be 5. And if you're talking about 2 teams, then the total of that is 10 amas wide. So 10 amas is the maximum gap allowed between double posts. If the gap is any wider, then 1 or more straight boards must be placed between the double posts so that no gap exceeds 10 amas. Diva Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. So that's it. You got up to 10, you have it up to 10 amas. Once up to 10 amas, you don't need any more. You don't have, the double posts at the corners are enough. You don't got to add anything more. Once it's more, you got to add more. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shal arba arba. The teams that we're talking about of oxen are not teams of 3 oxen, but teams of 4 oxen each. And therefore, here's again the calculation. A single team of 4 oxen is 6 2/3 amas. 4 times 1 2/3 amas. And 2 such teams are 13 1/3 amas wide. According to Rabbi Yehuda, then, a gap of 13 1/3 amas is permitted between double posts. Only if the gap is wider than 13 1/3 amas must straight posts be erected to narrow it. Okay? That's what we basically said. And that's what we said before. These are the shiurim of where this machlekes revolves around. Now, it's interesting to note, they bring down here on the bottom, what is their machlokes here? What were Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir arguing about when it came to these opening of the sizes of the gaps? What was their argument revolving around? So their argument was revolving around the following thing. When we're talking about these teams of oxen, there are teams that are used for plowing, and they were tied together. Now, the concern was like this, that if you're, okay, let me say it like this. The dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir can be explained as follows. Both Tanaim agree that there must be enough space for a single team of oxen to enter through one side of the enclosed area at the same time that another team exits through the same side. We'll learn about that soon. These two groups that we're talking about are two groups, one coming in, one is coming out. If the gap would be any smaller, animals using the well during the week when they are tied together in teams would knock down the posts, and the posts would then have to be erected anew every Friday before Shabbos. Reb Meir rules that since there are 3 oxen in a standard team, the rabbis permitted the gap to be wide enough to fit 2 teams of 3 oxen each, which is 10 amos wide. Rabbi Yehuda, however, holds that since in some places a team consists of 4 oxen, the rabbis allowed a gap wide enough for 2 teams of 4 oxen each, 13 1/3 amos. So this is where their machlokes comes. When do you need to add the extra bores? Meaning, when is it allowed? How wide do we allow this opening to be? And it's a pretty big opening, right? Whatever you say it is, it's a pretty big opening. It's bigger than your typical opening, right? Typically, if you have a 10 amos wide break in a wall, the wall is invalidated. Here, we're saying if it's up to 10 amos, these kinds of walls are good. And so the Chachamim said we're going to allow an opening to allow the teams of animals to go in and out, right? If we have and we have to allow this size, this amount of the opening, because otherwise the animals are going to knock down the post during the week when the animals are teamed together like this. And therefore, therefore, according to Reb Meir, there's usually 3 animals to a team. That's going to come out to be 10 amos. Okay, so we allow 10 amos. More than that is already too much. And that's when you have to start adding a board to make the gap smaller. And once you make the gap smaller, those animals aren't going to be able to necessarily get in either. But that's the way it goes. Once it's too big, you can't allow it to be too big. So the whole machlokes about how big the gap can be before I have to start filling it in is based on this question: do we look at the regular size of the teams of animals? That's what the Chachamim based it on. Or did Rabbi Yehuda say the Chachamim based it on areas that also sometimes have 4 animals? And it was based on those kinds of teams that they allowed that they decided how big the gap can be. Now, let me just here add something else. I just mentioned before, the general rule is that a partition is not valid if it has a gap of more than 10 amos. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda permits a gap of 13 1/3 amos because the law limiting a gap to 10 amos is rabbinic. The rabbis did not apply in the case of pilgrims traveling to Yerushalayim. So basically, we say 10 is okay. More than 10 is already a peritza. You have more than 10 according to Rabbi Yehuda, but the answer is that whole concept that 10 amos is going, or more than 10 amos can validate a wall, is a midrabanan. It's rabbinic law, and they suspended that for the purpose of these Eiler Golem. The Mishna concludes that whatever you hold, whether it's 2 teams of 3, 2 teams of 4, Kashurais v'lai mutaris. We're talking about that they're tied together, not that they're just kind of next to each other. Achach nechneses v'achas yotzes, and measuring based on if you had 1 team coming in and 1 team going out. Now, when you have 2 teams coming in together, you don't need as much space as when they're going in opposite directions.
Right.
So the point of saying this is now that we have to figure out what is the, we say that they're tied, and we say that one is coming in and one is going out. Now, but both of them still said their shear, right? One said the shear is 10, and one said the shear is 13 1/3, right? Each way they said that shear, right? So, and somehow or another, what those numbers could be different if it's tight, if it's tied together, or if it's coming, or if they're going in and out. So the way this is explained is the following. Okay, 1 second. All right. There is a concept that now again, the tied ones, when they're tied or loose, you can understand. When they're tied, they're closer together. They need less space. The point of one going in, one going out, is as follows. Okay. A measurement given in Amos, this is a general rule. A measurement given in Amos can refer either to exact Amos, that's called Amos Atzevos, or to long Amos, Amos Seichakos. You know, you could talk about one amma, and you could talk about a small amma and a little bit of a larger amma. That's how we find it throughout Mishnayos. The Mishnah teaches here that the gap between the double posts should be measured in long ammas. 2 teams of 3 oxen each passing each other in opposite directions have a total width of 10 long ammas. And if each team consists of 4 oxen, the total width is 13 1/3 long ammas. An exact amma is 24 finger breadths long, while a long amma is 1/2 finger breadth longer. That's it. But it's still bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. If the 2 teams would be measured when moving in the same direction, their combined width would be 10 exact ammas or 13 1/3 exact ammas. However, since they are measured when moving in opposite directions, their combined width is 10 or 13 1/3 long ammas. So therefore, when the Mishnah said that you're measuring these teams, it's number 1, they're tied together, and number 2, one going in, one going out, which means measure your amos by the longer amos. Have a wonderful day.
I don't
I don't get
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
One team.